Hello, you guys. I want to welcome a very special guest, Vanessa, onto the podcast. You do so many things. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I just want to say, literally, I was like, I remember how we connected. I was like posting random stuff on Instagram. I was like doing like the manly tasks around my house and we got to talking about how like it feels really like empowering to be able to kind of do these things that like without a man or whatever. And we were talking about single life era and just all of those things, and empowering ourselves and kind of just through being single and living our best lives. And we were just talking off air as well about how that even leads into, even into a marriage or even into other things as well, just how we can be more empowered as women to just own our truth, own our voice, share what's on our hearts, just all of that, just being fully embodied, I guess. So I want to have you introduce yourself and then we can kind of kick off a little chat.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, Audrey, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here and finally get to chat with you in person. This is like so exciting. So, thank you for this opportunity. And for everybody listening who doesn't know me, my name is Vanessa. I'm a coach and I am known as the no bullshit empowerment coach. So,
Yeah.
I focus on just empowering women to take their power back and to really step into the truest embodiment of who they are, because what we see so often with women are, we follow this checklist of all these things we think we have to have, like house, career, kids, white picket fence with a dog, all of those things. And
Mhm.
we arrive at this place where you get some of those things and then you're like, okay, I've arrived, I'm supposed to be happy now. And then you're like, wait, yeah, you're like, why am I still not happy? Like, what is happening? I have all the things that this like fairy tale, and it's not the reality. And so I hit that point, and for just to be clear here, I've never been married. I don't have children, but I went the career checklist path, and I think no matter where we are, we arrive at this same juncture, and then we're finding ourselves wondering, like, is this it? Like, there has to be more for this. Like, happiness has to be real, right? And so that's kind of how I got into my whole shtick and like what I preach about. And I've never really followed the grain anyways, right? Like, unmarried, I don't have kids, I'm 35 years old. Like, that's probably the route that we're just going to continue to follow. We'll see what happens. But I got to thinking as I went through this process how empowering it is, right? And you just mentioned when we were having a conversation about just doing like you said, the manly things around the house, right? And there's it's so empowering when you can find
Mhm.
ways to do things like that for yourself. Whether it's I think you were changing an air filter when we were
Yes.
talking, changing an air filter, filling the oil up in your vehicle,
Oh,
like little things like that. But there's also so many other ways in our lives where we can embody that independence, with whether or not you're a mother or not a mother, you're married, you're single, like whatever it is, there are ways that you can embody that independence. And it all comes from knowing more about yourself and who you are.
mhm. Oh my God, I love all of that. And I have like I'm not gonna go into the whole thing, of course, but like my story like is similar from when I started, where I was in a relationship. I had found the engagement ring that he was gonna use to propose, and I just like my heart just stopped. I was like, this is not the right path. But the checklist, like I can totally identify with that. We always have like I think society puts this whole checklist thing on our hearts and it's like we're supposed to do all these things and then we're gonna be fine, we'll be happy. But that's not the case. And so I love the embodiment era kind of is like what's coming to my mind, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like we get to live life, like we get to live such a beautiful life embodied as ourselves, embodied as what we, want to be. Like maybe some of us don't want kids, some of us don't want to get married or want a certain lifestyle that's different from that checklist life. And that's totally okay to live in that, live in that full expression of yourself.
Yeah, yeah, it's so exciting. And but the thing is it's so hard for us to get to,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
when you're following this checklist, it's really these the way I was describing it to a friend the other day is like monkey see, monkey do. We learn from what we see, we learn from the examples in our environment. And when
Yeah.
all we see are people doing the same things, like, go to school, go to college, get career, married, kids,
Yeah.
and then that's it. And you stay married for the most part, that's kind of changing. But we never stop to ask ourselves, like, is this what I want? We never stop to question, who am
Mhm.
I? What are the things that I want? And also, not most importantly, but super important is, what do I want out of my life? Like, do I want children? I went through my 20s, thinking like, okay, my mom had me at 29 and I was her first child. So as long as like I'm good if I don't have a kid before 29, like 29,
Yeah.
and then in my head I'm thinking like, well, if I don't have a kid by 29, then I'm too old to have a kid.
Mhm.
And so that's just a really, I hope someone is resonating with that as well. But my point is that we don't stop to question at all. And if somebody asks you, what do you think? What do you want?
Yeah.
You literally can't answer that question.
I love that you said that though, those particular questions you said, who am I? What do I want? But you know what was really resonating with me when you said that is almost the opposite vibe of that, where a lot of times we do say those things to ourselves in the opposite way. Like, who am I to want that? Who am I to be this person? Who am
Mhm.
I to want these things? Because I think that so often there's something inside of us nudging us, like you said about, I can make it to
Yeah.
29 without having a kid, nobody will judge me. Like, it comes up, like, we kind of know who we are inside, we know our desires, but something inside of us kind of stops it from coming all the way up into full embodiment where we're like, who am I to want that? Who am I to, be that woman? Who am I to like desire that? So I love what you said because it's flipping that script. Who am I? What do I want? Like, you have the full permission to live life as yourself, especially in this day and age. I mean, just, going for it. But I guess sometimes, yeah, it's like we've got to ask ourselves these questions. We have to kind of get a little bit more clear on what do we want. I would love to chat about that with you. So, like,
Yeah.
if you were to take like an example out of your own life, such as the kid, not having a kid, and being like, okay, like we're hitting that age or something like that, like maybe just chatting about how it's okay to go against the grain, go against those societal standards, and what we could do to kind of build our confidence to make it more, I guess, appealing or more exciting to follow our dreams rather than someone else's.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it really comes down to figuring out your self-worth. Not even
Mm,
figuring it out, but recognizing it. Like we talk about self-love. I know you talk about
right.
self-love a lot, right? But there's self-worth, there's self-confidence, there's self-care. There's so many layers of how we can connect to the self. And I believe that self-worth is so important and we kind of glaze over that. And self-worth really teaches us how to respect ourselves. Right. And I have this whole thing about love versus like. Like, you love family members, but you don't necessarily like them, right? Some of it comes out of obligation. And so I think there's so much to be said for self-love. It is so, so, so powerful. But I think if you leave out this self-worth piece, then you don't have that respect. It's almost like it's possible that it's not a choice to say I love yourself. Like, are you truly embodying the self-love, or are you doing it out of obligation because you think it's going to make a switch in your head, right? Like saying affirmations when you don't really believe
Mhm.
them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So to have that self-worth, you begin to treat yourself the way you treat your best friend. You check in with yourself. You're like, what do you need right now? Do you need to move? Do you need to eat something healthy, like to be able to nourish yourself just because like I actually love you, I actually care, not, well,
Mhm.
I'm lazy and I love myself and I'm going to go through the drive-through and get fast food, right? And that's real dialogue I've had with myself, right?
Right.
And so that's how I've learned to change, make that difference. But when you can really get into that self-worth, you feel like you're in a safe place with you, because
Mhm.
we know we can't ever open up in a vulnerable and in an emotional way if we don't feel safe. And if we're not creating that safe space within ourselves, how can we ever ask ourselves those questions and say, like, what do I want? Right. And so once you're in that safe place, this is a practice I just adopted not too long ago, is actually typing it up or writing it down. And beyond like manifestation journaling, instead of saying, I am this, I am that,
Mhm.
actually asking yourself the question and writing it down. So saying, what do I want? Here's all the things that I want. Maybe I want to travel, or I want to dance more. I want to go hang gliding. Okay, why? Why do
Mm.
I want to dance more? How does dancing make me feel? Why do I feel that way? And just taking it down in these layers and these chunks, because the more clear that we can get on the things that we want and why. I have chills as I'm saying this because it's like so powerful. But
Yeah.
the more clear we can get on what it is and why we want it, then
So
the
good.
expectation of everybody else just falls away because you're getting closer to like the alignment of your soul. And when you can do that, this is a whole nother layer, but then you learn how to communicate those needs to others and why it's important. And this is where,
Mm.
you can communicate to your family or to your spouse and really help them to see why you're not following these societal expectations. And then it gets them on board with you in a way that you honestly can't even imagine until you're in that space.
Everything you just said. I'm like processing in real time because I'm actually thinking about that. Like the fast food thing stands out because right now I'm in this moment where I'm super busy, my husband's super busy. And literally yesterday we had this conversation where I was like, literally, we are not planning ahead and we are doing this kind of like thing where we're just kind of getting what's, convenient, and we're falling into that trap of like convenience and all of that. And I was like, we are not practicing self-care. We are not practicing the self-love that we deserve. Like we are not treating our bodies like nice. Like we are not doing a good thing for ourselves just out of convenience. And I was like, we have to flip this script because we're kind of going down this path. And I was like, this is not what I preach. Like I do not want to be, it's once in a while, in my opinion, sure, it's fine once in a while, but I was like, we're just doing this thing where it's just getting more and more continuous for ourselves. And like, yeah, I was just like in real time, like, we have to think about this. This is not me loving myself or loving my body. But also just like what you were saying about just getting down to the why, that is
Mhm.
so interesting. Like literally, I just felt mind blown because so many people have practices or journal prompts or stuff like that, and it doesn't have that second layer to it. So why are we
Mhm.
doing everything? Getting clear on that, because just like with any practice in life, it's like, well, why do I have to drive this way, or why do I have to do this a certain way? You just kind of know why, and the why behind it is what helps you actually do it. So knowing
Yeah.
for ourselves, like, why do I want to embody this? Like, what's this going to do for me? Why do I want to do this for myself? So oh, I just absolutely love that. I want everybody to, do that. I saw that you have on your Instagram page like a free guide. Can
I
you just tell
do.
me a little bit about that? Is that kind of what some of that is? Just the getting down to it, the layer?
Yeah. So I actually, because that's a newer practice for me, that's a good point. I would love to add that on there.
Okay.
But that free guide it's that one is designed to be more experiential, which is fun. So
Ooh.
this one is where you get to write down what are the things that I would love to do. So again, like we use dancing, hang gliding, like traveling as an example. So write those things down, and then there's a piece on there for your calendar. So let's commit. Like let's say like
Nice.
when are we going to go hang gliding? Like let's put it on the calendar, and then there's a journal space at the bottom for them to reflect on how it felt, because that's another huge pillar, right? Is I got to go try these things
Yeah.
to see if I like them, right? Because
Yeah.
we may, drill down really deep in
Hmm.
this writing exercise and feel like, oh, this is in alignment with my soul and this is why it feels this way. And then we go try it and we're like, oh, that didn't actually feel the way that I lined it up in my mind. But now we have some data and we know, okay, maybe the piece, maybe I can find that elsewhere to still get this feeling that I know that I want. And so they go together really well. But that free guide is mostly the experiential, like get out and physically get in your environment and try something, like get a little weird, embody yourself, just try something new. Because
Yeah.
those are the things too that I think we hold in our head, and
Yeah.
you sit there for years and you're like, I want to dance, or I want to be in theater again. That was another one I had. I still haven't gone through that front, but to just like you store them and you don't say them, you don't even share them with your best friends sometimes. So to get it down on paper and then to actually commit and go and do it is another really powerful exercise.
I was just thinking, so it's like kind of like we have the what, we have like hopefully we have the why, or we're leading into the why. So then kind of the how, I was thinking about the how, like how we're going to execute this. And I'm thinking about like again coming up those parts of us that stop ourselves, those parts of us that aren't ready to, do something that's a little bit against the grain or something like that. But also just committing to speaking up to family members. So like part of that embodiment experience is being able to embody it. And there's going to be roadblocks along the way. There's going to be maybe spouses or friends or even those parts of ourselves that are like, no, you can't do this. You cannot do this. And I know that's something that you work with clients, on is like teaching people how to kind of get through that part as well. Like actually embodying it, like actually kind of following through, if you will. Can we touch on that a
Yeah.
little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where we get stuck no matter what, right? No matter where it doesn't matter if you're trying to launch a business or you're trying to embody yourself, it's all in the execution, it's in the immersion. And so, what I would say, what I encourage my clients to do when you're getting stuck is say, well, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Ooh,
Let's just sit here for a moment and let's just create this really elaborate experience. Like, what is the worst thing that could happen if I went and I tried to dance? I went to a group fitness class, a dance fitness class. What is the worst, absolute worst thing that could happen? And just to have them talk about it and them to say, well, okay, sometimes the answer is nothing. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's go
yeah,
do it, right? Or sometimes it's like, well, maybe I bend over to shake my booty and I rip my pants. Like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
great. Like I've done that. I've done that in a class before. And you know what happened? Absolutely nothing. Like everybody laughed and it was okay because it's a group of women that understand
mm,
that that's life, right? That's the way that it happens. So that's the first thing that we go through. And then the calendar piece is just important because otherwise the next excuse we make is that I don't have time. So
oh,
if we can figure out like what's the worst thing that can happen, we can kind of get through that mental exercise, then we're prepared for everything. And then your experience automatically, because you've already sat in like, what is the worst? We sit in the best as well. But then they go into the situation and they're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And that was really fun because you've already thought about what the worst case scenario is. So that's what I use. Is really powerful.
I love that. And now I'm almost like, I think I'm going to take a little piece of that to implement into the next retreats that I host,
Yeah.
where I'm like, literally, we're putting this on your calendar. Because that's something that, I'm thinking about as I'm coming off a retreat that I just hosted. We did so many embodiment practices where we got really deep into like, the mirror work, right? Like just looking in the mirror and just like how awkward it is at first when you start, but then how you get to be like this part of you where you're like, God, I love that woman. Like, and you just can't even look away because you're like, I'm so
Yeah.
obsessed with you. Um, and all of these beautiful embodiment practices. But when you leave a space like that, when you leave a retreat or you leave something like that, it's like you feel very empowered to take action on these types of things and continue living your life like that. However, life happens, right? We get back
Yeah.
to life. We get back the minute that you're back home and you just have those thoughts and those feelings again of, I can't, like it kind of shrinks you again a little bit because you're not around that magnification of like those women and the vibe and the home that's away from your own home and all of that. So, oh, I love that next step of like the why especially, and then the calendar is like lock it in. Like
Mhm.
just you're going to make time for this. Like you're going to continue these things.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it just goes back to self-worth, right? If I put it on my calendar because I
Mhm.
respect myself, I'm going to allow myself that time and that space. And I think that that would also help, for any of your guests who are listening
Mhm.
to really, you know, it's so powerful to be in a retreat environment, right? Where you are just immersed by all of this energy and women doing the same exercises. And when you come home, yeah, like you're back in the normal, regular life and you don't really know how to continue from there. And so I think also it goes back to self-love and self-worth, right? Like find how you can encapsulate that, whether it's in terms of an anchor, like maybe you need to have some sort of physical anchor, a photo anchor in your environment to help to connect you with that. But the other thing that I would encourage anyone listening to do, especially if you live with somebody else and you need to then be able to share this piece of your life, right? Like you are sharing life with somebody. So you can't keep that to yourself because if you do, that's also where you just start to press it back down and suppress it. So I think that there's so much power in also having your partner or roommate or whoever to understand that this was a super important and powerful experience. And so to have them be open and willing to hold the space for you to then be vulnerable again and to express and to share what that is. And then the other piece to this too is something I also do in my program is teach women the art of congruence, which is verbal and physical congruence, because a lot of times when we're sharing something like that, we're very vulnerable. So we're saying what we want to say, and it almost comes across as defensive, and our body is like soft. We're like, don't eat me, and we're like curled
Mhm.
up, but then we're like attacking. It's like
So
when your man asks you like, hey, what's wrong, is everything okay, and you're like, no, I'm fine, I'm
yep.
fine. And he's like, no, no, I know something's wrong, right? Because men don't understand this. They're like, this is not congruent. Like, you're
Yeah.
soft and you're tough, and I don't know what's wrong. I think something's wrong. So to be able to get through that piece, where like, I'm sure in my body, I'm sure in my language, and I can have this dialogue confidently.
Everything you're saying, and that, like, what keeps coming up for me is what you've said earlier in the conversation is the worthiness. Like, we are absolutely worthy of stepping into this power. We're worthy of stepping into this time in our lives, like, worthy of putting it on the calendar, worthy of having these conversations. And just we're worthy of allowing the people that are around us in our life, living day to day with us. We deserve to let them know where we're at, what we want, what we desire, because it's scary. Of course, it's scary because of all the conditioning that we've had through life that maybe we shouldn't be a certain way. So it's scary to say that out loud. But the people who love us, the people who are with us in day to day life, they're going to support us. Most of them
Mhm.
will. If not, I'm not even going to go there because that's just not the case. But if
Well,
not,
they're
then
not
we
for
talk.
you then, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, maybe they need to leave. But really, I mean, most people are going to sit there and want the best for you. And so, it's just letting them know what that looks like for you. But that is so scary. And I love how you brought up the difference, like, how it's not congruent.
Mhm.
What is there, like, a practice, or is there anything, we can maybe check out, on your page or anything like that that you would recommend to help us kind of get into that congruence? Where it just is
Yeah.
much better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of it comes from that practice of like the worst case scenario that I was saying before too, and figuring out like, okay, if I have this conversation, what is the worst thing that I think could possibly happen, right? And to work it through your body. I think you also do that, like some body
Mhm.
work. I
Yeah,
think I've
yeah.
seen you do that to move the energy through. So if you need to listen to some music, you need to like
Mm,
shake it out, go in the bathroom and like hop up and down a few times, whatever, to move some of that energy through you before you have this conversation. That's going to help just to have you be more centered and more grounded. But going back to this writing exercise, to just get clear on why you want this and
okay.
what you want it for, because it gives you, when you're clear, you can stand more confidently, right? So the other piece to this is using the I language versus we language. And this goes into feminine and masculine
Mm,
energetics. Like, there's so much intertwined in it, right? But the feminine is very, I don't want to say small, but it can be, it's more submissive, right? So
mhm.
when it, like, if you and I are having a conversation right now, the energy, the focus is on me. So I have the masculine or the more dominant piece of the conversation,
Yeah,
and you have the more feminine and more submissive piece of the conversation, right? And so everything is on me. The attention is on me. So as I'm talking, if I'm saying, well, I feel this way, I feel that way, there's power in that for certain things. But if we're sharing this, if I'm in the masculine, it doesn't necessarily, it subconsciously is not congruent, if that
okay.
makes sense, because we're talking about how I feel. I feel this way, I feel that way. So what I would encourage is to make it a dialogue that goes back and forth. So we can say, when I experience the way I feel when I'm the most embodied, when I'm at one of Audrey's retreats, it really makes me experience this piece of myself. And if anybody's watching video, you can see like my body
Mhm.
language is like I'm smaller, right? So I'm sharing, I'm vulnerable to this person who has their attention on me, right? And so what I would like to do, and you continue the conversation, is I would like to continue to be my most embodied self with you, with us as a unit, since we share a life together. And so I would love to explore like how we can, continue to expand on this further, and make this something, that's beautiful and huge, right? And so just to explain it, but if you come from it in a way where you are feeling like you have to hide completely, then the other person is going to just subconsciously be like, why are you why are you so defensive about this? Like, why are you being weird? Like, this is
Okay.
weird. And that's where we kind of pick up that vibe that it's like uncomfortable, unsafe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's making so much. This is honestly blowing my mind. I've actually never like really thought about this deeply. So you're
Yeah.
teaching me so much right now
Oh,
personally. So
good.
I know
There's
the
so many
audience is
layers.
getting,
It's so hard to explain in just a
yeah,
couple of sentences. So I'm glad.
no, it's making so much sense. And so it's like, even without trying to, we can almost trigger those, I don't know, trigger that different energy flow
Yeah.
just based on what we are like, the way that we are showing up in that conversation. So I guess like the next point I just want to make real quick is I'm assuming we need to kind of like take some breaths. We need to kind of find the right time to have these conversations. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't a good thing to do when we are in a different energy where we're going to come off, some type of way that's going to kind of trigger that in them.
Absolutely. Yes. You need to make sure that you do alchemize your emotions, you process
Mhm.
that, you let go of that emotionally charged thought.
Yeah.
So if there is something that you're feeling really uncomfortable to share or you're having anxiety around it, just make sure you really take the time to work it out and to get clear with yourself on what it is, and I'll use this as an example. I had to have a conversation with my father recently for my own healing, and I was terrified to have this conversation because he's somebody who's he shuts down. If you give him any sort of feedback or any sort of criticism, he shuts down, stops speaking, shakes his head, walks away. And so I was doing some healing on some of the things that happened in my childhood. Um, and for me to come back and to share those with him was terrifying. It was really scary for me, but I had to get clear on why it was important for me and say, okay, worst case scenario. Again, I'm thinking about what is the worst thing that can happen. He shakes his head, he walks away, hangs up on me. This was done over the phone, right? But then even while I'm working through that, the resolution that I had was, well, even if that happens, I still said what I need to say. I still get to share and get that out of me. I
Yes.
get to release all of that negative feeling, all of that frustration, all of that anger. And so when I dove into it, I was scary. I had notes. I had things written down, right? Like I was ready to just to make sure that I didn't miss my point, right? And honestly, and this will not be everyone's experience. I want to be clear. I'm not saying this is going to be everyone's experience, but my conversation with my dad went better than I ever could have imagined it. He was open and receiving to it. You know,
Right.
he apologized for not having the right tools to be the father that he thought he could be and that he wanted to be. And so, I mean, I think I had a pretty unique experience, but my point in sharing that is you can go into it absolutely terrified. Have what you need, like write down some notes and get clear on why it's important to you. And again, I've already said it a couple times, but that worst case scenario, like what is really the worst thing that could happen? Like, did you die? Are you going to die from doing this?
Right.
Probably not. So it's probably okay to do. And I think most often you'll be surprised with the outcome. Maybe not to that degree. That's a pretty extreme example, but there's a lot of power in just allowing yourself to lean in and to do it for you. Again, it all goes back to you. It's not for anybody else.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I'm like encouraging everybody to really like listen to this, like, kind of absorb everything and then get into those conversations because again, it's just part of living our life for us, like not in some crazy extremely selfish way, but like we do have to be slightly selfish to like to live in that embodiment. Like we need to protect ourselves basically and protect our energy. And so, oh, I love that. We
Yeah.
having these hard conversations is part of the process. So, thank you
It
so much.
is. And they're not fun, but I can promise you the more of them you have, the
Yeah.
easier they get to have. They don't necessarily feel easy at the beginning, but the quicker you can have them too, the better it is, the more confident you are in yourself. I think it also helps to build your self-love because
Yeah.
you're showing yourself that you
Yep.
can show up for yourself. You're showing
Exactly.
yourself, I'm not going to break promises to you.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. 100%. I love that. I talk about that often, just showing up, almost like that inner child work in a way where it's just like,
Mhm.
you know what, like staring at that younger version or just, just standing up for ourselves in general. Like,
Yeah.
That's huge. Thank you so much for everything that you have just led us through. This is one of those episodes
Yes.
where it's like I encourage people to listen again like 2 or 3 times because it's such a packed episode of so many beautiful things that like I want everybody to really just absorb because it's so powerful. Can you let us know like where everybody can find you? What do you have coming up? How is there any way to work with you? Anything like that?
Yes, yes. So you can connect with me on Instagram. That's going to be the easiest place. I kind of live there. So
Love it.
it's coach.ness, Ness. So nice and simple. And I'm on Facebook as well. It's Vanessa Cavalish. And I'll make sure, Audrey, you have the spelling
Yes.
of that so you can find it easily. But all of my accounts are linked. So it should be nice and easy. And then you can also tune into my podcast if you're interested. If you like Audrey has an amazing podcast. I do one that's kind of similar. It's called the Rebel Rise podcast. And it is all about breaking rules and also, moving with kindness and confidence through life. And so I have just a really broad spectrum of people that I bring on there who are just shaking things up and just really
Oof.
like embodying a specific area of their lives because we're not perfect everywhere. So yeah, so that's my podcast. That's also on Instagram, Rebel Rise Podcast, but that's on Spotify and on YouTube as well. And I have a one-on-one coaching program right now. So I'm hoping to be launching a group coaching program here in the fall,
Fun.
starting to do some live events, maybe some retreats. I don't know. We'll
Love
see
it.
what's in the pipeline for that. But right now it's one-on-one because I'm finding that it's so powerful to be able to troubleshoot all of this because it is a lot of really deep work. And so to have somebody that can hold you accountable and it's not accountable in a sense of like, did you do this, right? But it's like, hey, here's what I tried. This is where I got stuck. And to have just somebody who feels like a bestie to hold space for you and to help you to move the needle to the next level. So that's what I offer right now is the one-on-one program.
So good, so powerful. Before we go, I just want to ask if you would leave us with any self-care, self-love tip, anything that like, the audience can just like do quickly just to kind of reset and care for themselves.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing that I have been doing in my life right now is this act of romanticizing the feelings that I'm having. And we can insert any other word. If you don't resonate with romanticize, that's fine. You think of it like the scene of a movie, think of it as just like a beautiful moment of presence, whatever we want to call it. You can sub whatever word for it. But as we're moving through these big things, learning how to love ourselves again, learning how to have self worth and respect for ourselves again, there's a lot of emotions that come up and they're not always good emotions. They're not always positive emotions. And so we sit in those and we get to make the choice. Are we going to sit in this for a day? Are we going to sit in this for an hour? Are we going to sit in it for a minute or a few seconds? Because it can really move out of you. I think it's like 7 seconds that you feel that raw emotion. And then beyond that, it's our minds giving it meaning. So when you make that choice to say, I just feel miserable today, something terrible happened, and I just want to be upset. Because if we're being honest with ourselves, we know we're choosing to be upset. We're like, I just want to be
Yeah.
mad. Right. And that's okay. If you want to be mad, that's okay. You already know that you're making that choice. So find a
Yeah.
way to make it a beautiful moment. And
Oof.
maybe it doesn't feel like that when it's happening. Maybe it feels like that afterwards. But since we have the choice, we're allowing ourselves the space because we love ourselves to be upset, to be sad, to be angry. What is the beauty that you can find in that? Can you draw yourself a bubble bath? Put some rose petals in there and sit in the tub and cry and read a book? Or can you, if you live by water, could you go dip your toes in the water and make it beautiful? Could you just take a drive down a country road and sit there and cry or cry while you're driving? Like
Mhm.
and the reason that I say this is because we have one life to live. Like we
Yeah.
literally have it once. We do not know when our last day is going to be. And we are entitled to all of these emotions. Our experiences are all, relative and very personal to us. So feel that, own that, make that choice in everything you do, every experience you have, whether it's a new experience, it's embodiment, it's self-love, it's self-care, it's being sad. Find a way to make that a piece of your movie. And
Mm.
that is the thing that I would say, have that be the biggest self-care, self-love takeaway that would be simple for you. And I say simple because I started small, and I would just take a photo of something easy, like a pile of oranges on my counter, put a nice filter on it and some vibey music, and post it on my Instagram stories.
Cute. Yeah.
And that felt romantic to me.
Oh,
That
good.
felt, I took a picture of some pampas grass that's in my house. I put a nice filter and some music over it. So you can do this with even simple things. So if you're sitting there thinking like, oh my God, my life is boring, there's nothing romantic about it, that's okay. Find a way to be creative. Look at that. Instead of saying romantic, let's say creative. Because again, the concept is the same. It's just whatever word resonates for you.
I love that. Literally, like, pour our coffee in, like, the cuter coffee mug, or, like, it's like taking
Yeah.
that. I was talking about that at this retreat, actually. It was one of the points I made where I was like, why do we save the china? Like, why do we not use our china? Why do we not wear, like, the nice underwear? Like, why do we not do like, what the hell? Like, what are we doing, you know? I actually had a pair of shoes, really cute rain boots that, I didn't know this, like, shows you how much, like, I'm into fashion, right? But, I didn't know that our shoes, like, break down without use. Like,
I didn't
certain
know that
shoes,
either.
certain materials, certain fabrics, like, if it's not being used, it will literally just, like, break, like, it will crumble away. Um, yeah, there's somebody out there that can explain that a lot better, but, like, it's a thing I didn't know, and so, like, literally these rain boots, like, I had sitting there for, like, the cute rainy day or, like, the perfect thing, and now, like, the money I spent on them, it's trash, like, literally I had to throw them
Mhm.
away. So, like, but I love what you're saying. It just adding the like, stop, like, waiting, you know, and just
Yeah.
allow yourself to live in that moment. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And just make
Yeah.
it however, creatively, like, whatever you wanna make it, like, just yeah, I love that. It's another way to honor ourselves.
Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for coming on. Just thank you so much, and I just can't, I cannot wait to like continue watching you, and I'll link your
Yeah, me
podcast
too.
below, and just where to find you and all of that stuff as well.
Yes, amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been an amazing conversation. So I appreciate it.